In the quiet wilderness of Vermont, where nature unfolds its mysteries in whispers, Mark Anderson thought he had seen it all. But nothing could have prepared him for the visitor that arrived at his window every morning. At first, it was just a glimpse, a shadow moving at the edge of the forest, golden eyes flickering through the mist. Then, the knocking began. A bobcat, wild and untamed, appearing like clockwork at dawn, pressing its paw against the glass as if it had something to say. Mark watched in awe, his curiosity growing with each visit. Was it hunger? Territory? Or was this elusive predator trying to send a message? When the bobcat's strange behavior intensified, Mark made a decision that would change everything. He followed it. What he discovered deep in the woods would leave him breathless. Because sometimes, nature doesn't just call, it begs to be heard. And what Mark found that day would shake him to his core.
The morning fog rolled thick through the Vermont forest, wrapping around the trunks of ancient maples and coating everything in a pearl-gray haze. Mark Anderson stood at his kitchen window, coffee mug warming his hands, and watched as the first rays of sunlight attempted to pierce through the misty veil. The view still felt surreal, even after 3 months of living in their new home. A modern cedar-sided house nestled at the edge of the Green Mountain National Forest. At 52, Mark had finally achieved what he and his wife Bella had dreamed about for decades, escaping the suffocating concrete jungle of Boston for the tranquility of rural Vermont. Their daughter Emma was away at college now, and with Mark's successful transition to remote work as a software architect, the timing had been perfect. The soft padding of bare feet on hardwood announced Bella's arrival before her arms wrapped around his waist. "Anything interesting out there this morning?" she asked, resting her chin on his shoulder. Mark smiled, taking another sip of coffee. "Just the usual suspects. Mr. Cardinal at the feeder, couple of chickadees. The fog's pretty thick today." A movement at the tree line caught his eye. Something larger than their typical woodland visitors emerged from the mist, and Mark's breath caught in his throat. 20 yards from their house, a bobcat materialized like a ghost from the fog. "Bella," he whispered, "look." Her arms tightened around him instinctively. "Is that?" "A bobcat. Adult female, I think." The animal was beautiful, muscular and compact, with distinctive black-tipped ears and facial ruffs that gave it a wild, wise appearance. Its coat was a mixture of gray and brown, perfectly camouflaged for the New England forest. But what struck Mark most were its eyes, intense, intelligent, and fixed directly on him. The bobcat took a few steps closer to the house, its movements fluid and purposeful. Mark had researched local wildlife extensively before their move and knew that while bobcats were native to Vermont, they were typically elusive creatures that avoided human contact. This one's behavior seemed unusual. "Should we be worried?" Bella asked, her voice tight with concern. Mark shook his head slowly, not taking his eyes off the magnificent creature. "No, we're safe in here. The windows are reinforced. Remember all those requirements from the insurance company because we're in wildlife territory? Besides, bobcats are generally no threat to humans. They're primarily after rabbits, mice, that sort of thing." The bobcat sat down on its haunches, still staring intently at their window. After a few moments, it raised one paw and deliberately placed it against the ground, then pulled it back, repeating the motion several times. "That's odd," Mark muttered. "Almost looks like it's trying to tell us something." Bella laughed nervously. "You've been watching too many Disney movies, honey." The bobcat continued its strange behavior for another minute before standing, giving them one last penetrating look and melting back into the fog-shrouded forest. "Well, that was exciting," Bella said, finally releasing her hold on Mark. "I'm going to get ready for work. Try not to adopt any wild animals while I'm gone." She kissed his cheek and headed upstairs to shower. Mark remained at the window long after the bobcat had disappeared, his coffee growing cold in his hands. Something about the encounter had felt significant, though he couldn't explain why. He'd always had a deep connection with nature. It was one of the main reasons they'd moved here. But this felt different, more personal somehow. Throughout the day, as he worked on coding projects for his company's latest software release, his mind kept drifting back to those intelligent eyes and that deliberate pawing motion. He found himself Googling bobcat behavior during his lunch break, but nothing he read matched what he'd witnessed. The next morning, Mark was back at his window at dawn, coffee in hand. Right on schedule, the bobcat appeared. This time, it came closer to the house, and Mark could see it was the same individual. He recognized a distinctive pattern of darker spots on its right flank. Again, it performed that strange pawing gesture before disappearing into the woods. This pattern continued for a week. Every morning, between 6:30 and 7 a.m., the bobcat would appear, approach the house, make its puzzling gestures, and leave. Mark began to notice additional details. The animal always emerged from and returned to the same section of forest, and its behavior seemed increasingly urgent. Bella grew more concerned with each visit. "It's not natural, Mark. Wild animals don't behave this way. Maybe we should call Fish and Wildlife?" "And tell them what?" "That a bobcat is visiting our house, but not actually doing anything threatening?" Mark shook his head. "They'll think we're crazy. Besides..." He hesitated, knowing how it would sound. "I think it wants something from us." Bella gave him that look, the one that questioned whether her practical, logical husband had finally lost his mind. "It's a wild animal, Mark. It doesn't want anything from us except maybe to eat our non-existent pets." But Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something more was going on. He began taking videos of the visits on his phone, studying them during work breaks. The bobcat's behavior was too consistent, too deliberate to be random. On the 10th morning, something changed. The bobcat appeared as usual, but instead of its normal routine, it walked right up to the window where Mark stood. Its paw reached up and actually tapped against the glass. Once, twice, 3 times. Mark nearly dropped his coffee mug. Behind him, Bella gasped. "Okay," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "That's definitely not normal." The bobcat lowered its paw and took several steps back, looking expectantly at Mark. Then it moved a few more steps toward the forest before stopping to look back at him again. "It wants me to follow it," Mark said, certainty flooding through him. "Absolutely not." Bella grabbed his arm. "Are you insane? This isn't a Disney movie, Mark. That's a wild predator. A wild predator that's been visiting our house every morning for 10 days without showing any aggression." Mark turned to face his wife, taking her hands in his. "Honey, something is wrong out there. This animal is trying to communicate with us. What if it needs help?" "Then let the professionals handle it," Bella insisted. "I'm calling Fish and Wildlife. They'll never get here in time. By the time they arrive, it'll be gone." Mark was already moving toward the mudroom, pulling on his heavy boots. "I'll be careful, I promise. I'll keep my distance, and I've got my phone. I'll call you every few minutes to check in." Bella followed him, practically vibrating with anxiety. "This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy." "Probably," Mark agreed, shrugging into his warm jacket. "But I have to know." He pulled out his phone and pulled up the GPS app, marking his starting location. Then he grabbed a heavy walking stick from beside the door. Not that it would do much good against a bobcat, but it made him feel better. The bobcat was still waiting when he stepped outside, the morning air crisp and cool against his face. It regarded him for a moment, then turned and trotted toward the trees, stopping every few yards to ensure he was following. Mark followed at a careful distance, his heart pounding with equal parts excitement and apprehension. The bobcat led him along what appeared to be a game trail, winding between ancient trees and through patches of mountain laurel. He tried to memorize landmarks: a lightning-struck oak, a distinctive boulder, a fallen log covered in shelf mushrooms. After about 15 minutes of walking, they crested a small rise, and Mark spotted something through the trees. A small cabin, weathered gray with age but still seemingly solid. He knew there were a few old hunting cabins scattered throughout these woods, though he hadn't explored enough to find any yet. The Bobcat led him right up to the cabin, then began pawing intensely at a specific spot near the foundation. Mark approached cautiously, every sense on high alert. As he drew closer, he could make out a gap between two of the foundation stones, a space just large enough for a bobcat to squeeze through. Then he heard it, a weak, plaintive cry from beneath the cabin. Mark dropped to his knees, pulling out his phone's flashlight. When he shined it into the gap, his heart nearly stopped. There, in the darkness, lay a bobcat kitten. It was clearly in distress, its breathing labored, one leg awkwardly positioned. "Oh God," he breathed. The mother bobcat, for surely that's what his visitor was, made a soft chirping sound that he'd never heard before. When he looked at her, the intelligence in her eyes seemed even more pronounced. She had led him here deliberately, seeking help for her baby. Mark's hands shook as he pulled out his phone again, first to call Bella, then to search for wildlife rehabilitators in the area. The first call went to voicemail, but the second connected him to someone who understood the urgency of the situation. "This is Linda with Green Mountain Wildlife Rescue," a calm voice answered. "How can I help you?" Mark explained the situation as quickly and clearly as he could, trying not to sound like a madman as he described the mother bobcat's behavior over the past 10 days. To his relief, Linda took him seriously. "You're actually describing a documented behavior, though it's rare," she explained. "There have been cases of wild animals seeking human help when their young are in trouble. Can you text me your location? I can be there in about 45 minutes. In the meantime, stay calm and don't try to approach the kitten. Even if the mother seems to trust you, she's still wild." While waiting for Linda, Mark called Bella again. This time she answered, frantic with worry. He explained what he'd found, and her fear turned to concern of a different kind. "The poor baby," she said, "and that mama, being so clever to get help. Do you need me to come?" "No, stay at work. The wildlife rescuer is on her way. I'll keep you updated." The wait seemed endless, but Linda finally arrived, her SUV equipped with all manner of rescue equipment. She was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and the kind of calm confidence that immediately put both Mark and, surprisingly, the mother bobcat at ease. "Well, you've made a friend," Linda remarked, watching as the mother bobcat maintained her position nearby, alert but not aggressive. "She must really trust you." It took nearly 2 hours to safely extract the kitten. The foundation stones were old and unstable, and they had to work carefully to avoid causing a collapse. All the while, the mother bobcat watched, occasionally making soft vocalizations to her baby. Finally, Linda was able to reach the kitten with a special grabbing tool, gentle but secure. When she pulled it into the light, Mark could see it was severely dehydrated, and its back leg was definitely injured. "Looks like it's been trapped down there for several days," Linda said, examining the kitten while keeping it safely contained in a special carrier. "Probably fell through a gap and couldn't get back out. The leg appears broken, but with proper care, the prognosis is good." The mother bobcat approached the carrier, sniffing carefully. Linda spoke to her in soft, reassuring tones. "Don't worry, Mama. We'll take good care of your baby." To Mark's amazement, the mother bobcat then approached him, brushing against his leg once, just like a house cat might, before returning to Linda and the carrier. "She's thanking you," Linda said with a smile. "I've worked with wildlife for 30 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this." She knew exactly what she was doing, leading you here." They arranged for both mother and kitten to be transported to the wildlife center. The mother bobcat actually allowed herself to be trapped, seemingly understanding that staying with her baby was the best course of action. Mark helped Linda carry the carriers to her vehicle, his heart full of emotions he couldn't quite name. "Would it be all right if I visited?" he asked as Linda prepared to leave. "Just to see how they're doing?" "Of course. They'll be with us for at least 6 weeks while the kitten's leg heals, and we make sure they're both healthy. I'll call you when they're ready to be released. Maybe you can help us bring them back here." Over the next several weeks, Mark and Bella made regular visits to the wildlife center. They watched as the kitten's leg healed and it grew stronger, playing with special toys designed to help it develop natural hunting skills. The mother remained protective but calm, seemingly understanding that these humans were helping, not harming. Linda used their case as an opportunity to educate them about bobcats and other local wildlife. They learned that bobcats are essential predators in the ecosystem, helping to control rodent populations and maintain nature's delicate balance. They discovered that while bobcats are generally solitary, mothers are incredibly devoted to their young, teaching them everything they need to know during their first year of life. "Your mother bobcat is especially remarkable," Linda told them during one visit. "Not only did she problem solve to get help for her kitten, but she also showed amazing restraint and trust. Most wild animals would have been too frightened of humans to approach like she did." Finally, after 8 weeks of rehabilitation, Linda declared both bobcats ready for release. On a crisp autumn morning, Mark and Bella helped transport the carriers back to their property. They chose a spot near where Mark had first started following the mother bobcat, close enough to familiar territory, but far enough from human habitation to give them a good start. When they opened the carriers, the kitten bounded out first, its previously broken leg now completely healed. It moved with the fluid grace characteristic of its species, immediately taking cover in a nearby thicket. The mother emerged more slowly, pausing to look directly at Mark one last time. In her eyes, he saw the same intelligence that had first captured his attention, but now without the desperate urgency. "Thank you," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't understand the words. But maybe she understood the sentiment because she blinked slowly at him. A cat's kiss, before turning to follow her kitten into the forest. In the months that followed, Mark and Bella occasionally caught glimpses of the bobcats from their window. Sometimes they would see the mother teaching her growing kitten to hunt, demonstrating the perfect pounce on an unsuspecting mouse. Other times they would spot them resting on sun-warmed rocks, grooming each other in the afternoon light. But the mother never again approached the house or sought their attention. She had needed their help once, and somehow she had known exactly how to get it. Now she and her child were back where they belonged, wild and free. The experience changed Mark and Bella's relationship with their forest home. They became more involved in local wildlife conservation efforts, volunteering at Linda's rescue center and helping to educate their neighbors about coexisting with wild animals. They learned to appreciate the delicate balance between helping wildlife when necessary and respecting their natural independence. Their daughter Emma was skeptical when they first told her the story, but during her next visit home, they spotted the bobcat pair in the distance. Watching the mother and child moving through their natural habitat, Emma had to admit there was something magical about it. "It's like she knew," Emma said wonderingly. "She knew you would understand and help." Mark smiled, remembering those intense eyes at his window. "Sometimes," he replied, "we just have to listen when nature tries to tell us something." As the seasons changed and life moved forward, Mark often reflected on those 10 days when a wild bobcat had chosen to trust him. The experience had taught him that the line between wild and tame, between animal intelligence and human understanding, was perhaps thinner than most people believed. It had shown him that compassion could bridge even the widest gaps between species. Every morning, he still stood at his window with his coffee, watching the fog roll through the trees. And while the bobcat no longer appeared to knock, he remained ready to listen, just in case another wild creature ever needed to ask for help.